So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Boris Johnson agreed to Brexit deal knowing it was a complete mess, claims John Major. So John Major launched a scathing attack on Boris Johnson's handling of Brexit, saying Johnson's administration agreed to the protocol despite knowing it was unworkable. Quote, that must be the first agreement in history that was signed by people who decided it was useless in the first place, end quote. So this was Major talking to a select committee. So I don't think either side saw it as useless. I think the EU saw it as a way to resolve the border issues and protect the single market. Johnson, on the other hand, saw it as a way to win the 2019 election, and this was the only way he could have got it done. He promised the clowns in government that after we left the EU, he would renege on the deal. So you could argue, yeah, he thought it was useless. But he made those people look dumb, especially the ones in the ERG, because it's harder for them to complain about the withdrawal agreement and the protocol, because the protocol is part of the agreement. So I think it's unfair to say the protocol is useless. It was just used for nefarious activities by the British. The former Conservative Prime Minister did not name his successor, but expressed astonishment at the acceptance of the protocol. The blunder was worsened by the agreement to impose checks on goods entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain. He said, quote, the protocol is a mess, it was very poorly negotiated, end quote, Major told the Northern Ireland Committee. Quote, I think some of the promises made after the protocol that there would be no checks on trade from Britain to Northern Ireland. How those promises came to be, I cannot imagine, because they were patently wrong. The protocol needs changing. I'm baffled as to how we could have reached a situation where that protocol was accepted, end quote. So May never accepted that there could be a border in the Irish Sea, both because she did not have the votes for it. She was reliant on the DUP at the time, who were against her withdrawal agreement, and because politically I think she believed that putting a border within the union would damage the union in an optics level. Maybe being in a coalition with the DUP gave her that impression. Major, who was the Prime Minister from 1990 to 1997, criticised Johnson's administration for signing the protocol with the EU, apparently on the basis it would be later reformed. It wouldn't be later reformed, they would renege on it. That was the premise that Johnson gave to a lot of the DUP-sters. Major said on all sides, London, Dublin, Brussels and parties in Northern Ireland would have to compromise. Quote, a statesman-like approach or response would be to recognise that nobody is going to get everything they wish, but to accept a compromise in the interest of returning democratic government to Northern Ireland. That will not be easy for anyone, end quote. And the thing is, the EU have already compromised. The protocol in itself, a compromise. And some politicians don't understand this. It's not EU border officials carrying out the checks in the Irish Sea, it's British ones, even though there are risks that British goods could get into the EU single market without being properly checked. That's a compromise. The checks in the Irish Sea are less than the ones at the French border. That's a compromise. Why don't people get this? He said it seemed Rishi Sunak's Downing Street team were making progress in talks with the EU. It was a tacit rebuke on the DUP and possibly also an appeal to Sunak to face down Tory Brexit hardliners. Major counselled compromise. Quote, statesmen who do this will succeed. Politicians who keep shouting slogans to their most extreme supporters will not, end quote. And I think it depends on the context of what's happening, rather than making that just an example. Major lauded the contribution of his Irish counterparts, Albert Reynolds and John Brutton, as well as Northern Ireland party leaders, clerics, civil servants, and of course former President Bill Clinton and former Prime Minister Tony Blair in paving the Good Friday Agreement. Quote, this is a settlement that has many parents, no one can claim full paternity, end quote. And he's right, it's not just the Americans that deserve credit, or even Tony Blair. There were many different other European countries that are involved. I think even the Finns were involved in helping to get the Good Friday Agreement through and demilitarise essentially the IRA. So, there are a lot of people who deserve credit here. Major expressed concern that poverty in Northern Ireland was undermining peace and reconciliation. Quote, economic hardship is a divisive force, end quote. Poverty is a big problem within Northern Ireland. I think it's even worse than some places in other places of the UK. They can easily get dragged into criminal gangs, the people there. And we know that exists within Northern Ireland. Eradicating poverty in Northern Ireland would go a long way in resolving some of the issues. But the issues run deeper than that. This is about identity, national identity. And, I'm no expert in this area, but Brexit blew a hole in Northern Ireland. Nationalists fear that Brexit will take them away from Ireland. Unionists fear that the protocol takes them away from the United Kingdom and pushes them closer to United Ireland. We know this is not the case. Countries have internal borders, even different regulations between different areas. Look at the United States, for example. But this is about identity emotions, and these two things can throw logic out the window quicker than you can say Brexit means Brexit. So there's a lot of work to be done here. And I don't know, because the chance are the DUP might not even go back into Stormont, even if Sunak gets a further deal on the protocol, because they have their 7 nonsense tests that they're going to try and stick by, and they are worried about hemorrhaging votes to the more radical party, the TUV, who are more radical than the DUP. So yeah, this is some scary stuff here. And Sunak has a lot of work to do, and this is a result of Brexit. This is the world the Brexiteers created at the end of the day. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.